Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are back, this time of course taking a look at the IRIS Simulations Pilatus PC-21. The aircraft has been available for a couple of days now, and whilst usually military turboprops are not my sort of thing, it looks like IRIS have done a really nice job with this one, so I thought we'd give it a go. We're going to be carrying out a full review of the aircraft, so as usual we'll try and take a pretty detailed look at both the modelling and texturing internally and externally. We'll touch on a couple of features of the product, we'll carry out a full flight through from a cold and dark start to shutdown, and as ever at the end we'll cap off the review with my overall thoughts on the product. I've got what I hope will be another fun flight for us lined up here today. To some of you the scenery may look familiar. We are currently on the ground at Mollis, which is a former Air Force base in Switzerland. Previously we also flew the Just Flight Hawk in the same area whilst reviewing the aircraft. It is an absolutely stunning location, there's a really good run through the mountains as well, and that's where we're going to be taking the PC-21 today. For those of you who perhaps fancy a crack at the run yourselves, and I do highly recommend it, I'll leave a list of the waypoint coordinates down in the video description below. Anyway, that just about covers everything off for now, so we'll continue on with our tour of the IRIS PC-21. As you'll already have noticed from the introduction, overall IRIS Simulations have done a very nice job with the add-on. Detailing is certainly generally very good, although there are certain areas on the aircraft which hold up better than others. IRIS themselves have stated that the texture resolution throughout the product is variable, the aim there being to ultimately make the PC-21 compatible on the Xbox as well. It's always a little bit of a shame to hear of PC products being downgraded to make them console compatible, but ultimately here I do think that IRIS have done a pretty good job in terms of keeping the detail up where it needs to be, and choosing appropriately the areas which have been given a reduction in detail. For example, down on the nose wheel you can see generally the detailing is nice. I particularly like the modelling there on the landing light. We do have nice features as well, such as chocks and covers. But that being said, as illustrated, some of the textures are a little bit more basic. For example there, the texturing on the tyre, it does look rather plasticky. And the same is really true throughout the aircraft. Again, I like that we have the appropriate covers and flags as well. I think the detailing there on the various hatches is pretty good. But you'll also notice here that the white detailing on the livery is not particularly sharp, presumably as a result of the textures not being 4K. And indeed I did find other areas of the livery as well where the detailing can be quite jagged. The PC-21 comes with custom pilot models, which is great to see. Might be nice as well to include the option to use the default Sobo pilot models. Whilst the custom pilot models are nice enough, and it is great to see as well that we have bespoke pilot suits there to fit the livery. Generally speaking, I do find the animations and indeed the modelling of the pilots to be a little bit rough versus the default Sobo pilots. There are lots of nice features on the IRIS Simulations PC-21, we'll take a look at some of those as we go. We've already seen that the aircraft comes with a host of custom ground equipment which can be added using the onboard MFD. By default the PC-21 comes with 2 external fuel tanks. These can be added or removed via the Sim's Fuel and Load Manager, so you can fly the aircraft in a cleaner configuration. And also, once again, using the onboard MFD options, you can also fit out the PC-21 with smoke pods, and we'll be taking a look at those in our video today. Lastly, we do also have the option for an external ground power unit, and if we add in some pilot weights, again via the Sim's Fuel and Load Manager, we can choose whether or not to visually display pilot models both in the front and the back, and once again automatically, as you can see, much of our ground equipment has been removed. So I think that overall IRIS Simulations have done a very nice job with the PC-21 in terms of its external modelling and texturing. For sure there are areas that could be improved, but IRIS have made pretty clear as to why that is. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, I think they've been pretty clever, pretty astute in terms of their choices, where the detailing has been added and where it's been left out. As a result, I think generally the aircraft looks pretty great externally. It would be nice perhaps, for example, to have IRIS offer a high resolution set of textures available on their website for those of us who do plan to use the product solely on PC. The story is much the same, I would say, internally. Generally speaking, I think the aircraft looks great, but there are certainly areas that we'll show in just a moment where the detail falls down slightly. One area of the PC-21 which I think that IRIS have done an excellent job with is the MFDs. They're a bit of a work of art, very crisp, very well rendered. We'll be taking a closer look at those in just a moment. Systems-wise, the depth of the product is pretty good. We'll obviously see more of that during our flight. The PC-21 comes with an onboard FMS, so quite a nice option there for setting up any flight plans. I did have a couple of issues whilst using it, particularly with regards to entering aircraft weight. We'll talk more about that during the flight. But generally speaking, systems depth pretty good. Of course, as you might expect, the weapon systems aren't modelled on the aircraft, and much of the functionality available from the MFDs and the UFC is somewhat simplified. And once again, IRIS have certainly chosen certain areas of the cockpit to give lower resolution detail in terms of modelling and texturing. You can see quite a low poly count, quite rough modelling around the joystick there, for example. The texturing of the flooring and the rudder pedals as well, pretty simple by Microsoft Flight Simulator standards. As before though, I didn't find it gave the aircraft a low quality feel. All the areas that you'll be looking at regularly throughout the flight are done very nicely, particularly, as I say, with regards to the MFDs. As far as the MFDs go, the left MFD used for navigation, the centre MFD is the primary flight display, and the right MFD is used to check various aircraft systems, control various options on the add-on. So firstly, looking at the instructors page of the right-hand MFD, you can see here various options, some of which we've already taken a look at during the video. For example, here we can disconnect or connect the ground power unit. You can choose whether or not to fit the smoke pods. We can also choose whether or not we're going to operate the aircraft for solo flight or multiplayer flight, and I believe that has some bearing on what you'll see in terms of the aircraft smoke effects. Light's pretty self-explanatory. You can choose various lighting configs there for both day and night. We also have various AI start options in terms of startup, ready for taxi, ready for takeoff, and an auto shutdown. The PC-21 can be flown from both the front and the rear cockpit, but you will need to switch between the two. You can also choose between millibars and inches of mercury for the altimeter, as well as choosing between a PC-21 style HUD or using the Sim's default F-18 HUD. Anyway, going on to the next page of the instructor station, we also have the ability to add or remove the chocks, flags, pilots, as well as the engine exhaust covers. Here you can see we have all of the options selected to auto. A quick run through the various systems pages. Firstly, the hydraulics. See, very nice modelling in terms of the schematics. We have the same there for the electrical page, fuel page. ECS not currently modelled. And on the engine page there we have a few more engine parameters outside of the normal systems display. Unfortunately, a few of the pages don't seem to work. For example, checklist doesn't seem to be an available function. Same goes for the warning page and the nav page. And same as well there for the ops page. Nevertheless though, as I said, I think the MFDs have some really nice functionality. I think they're very well modelled, certainly visually I think they look great. Again, fairly pared down in terms of functionality. You'll get more of a chance to see those during the flight. One feature which I really liked, although it's fairly rudimentary still at the moment, you can actually add custom mapping to the aircraft in terms of the navigation display. As it stands currently, there are only a couple of options available for locations in Australia, but IRIS Simulations do state in the manual that they're going to allow us to add our own custom charts later on, and apparently there will be a tutorial on how to do so. So just a very quick look at the custom map facility. We are currently on the ground at Yankee Papa Echo Alpha. I believe it's an Australian Air Force base, and you can see if we hit map here on the top left of the left MFD, we can bring up a chart, and you'll have a real-world, real-time display available on the navigation display. I really like that as a feature. Hopefully IRIS will make it relatively user-friendly to add our own charts later on. Of course, though, you would need access to any charts that you wish to use in the first place. As mentioned, the aircraft can be flown from either the front or the rear cockpit. You will need to select the appropriate option via the ops page on the right MFD. Great to see as well, you will also see a visual pilot model in the opposite seat. I find that always ramps up the immersion just that little bit more. And lastly, touching on the cockpit night lighting, generally very good. We have both panel backlighting in green, that's adjustable, and we also have an adjustable floodlight. So for me, overall, despite IRIS Simulations admitting themselves that certain areas of the aircraft have been given a little bit less depth to make the aircraft ultimately compatible on the console, I still think that the aircraft broadly looks great, and it certainly has that feel of quality to it, as you'll see throughout the flight. Okay, so we're back on the ground in Molly, this time of course in the IRIS Simulations Pilatus PC-21. So we'll crack on with our before start checks. The part brake is set, battery masters 1 and 2 both on, same there as well for generators 1 and 2. We do currently have external power connected to the aircraft, as you can see. We'll check the flight controls. And they are full free and in the correct sense. Internal lights are set as required. Oxygen selected off for the front cockpit. We've already got the oxygen selected on there in the rear cockpit. Same as well for the ejection seat, that's currently armed down the back. just to save us switching between the two cockpits later on. Power control lever is full and free and selected off. Flaps lever is selected up. Fire test onto system 1. And we have a good test there on system 1, over to system 2. And that checks as well. And back to the central position. Lamp test. Looks good. PMS is guarded. Anti-skid is selected on. Auto start is guarded. Starter ignition both set to auto. Fuel pumps both set to auto. Emergency jettison is guarded. External fuel pumps both set to auto. Trim aid is selected on. Trim aileron power is selected on. And trim indications all in the green. Landing gear handle is selected down 3 greens. Emergency landing gear handle is selected in. Arm switch is selected off. SFD is checked. UFCP is checked. And the EMD is checked. Compass and clock both look good. Left MFD looks good. PFD looks good. And the right MFD looks good. And finally the DWP, we have oil, oxygen, hydraulics, anti-skid, generator 2 and canopy, all of which we're expecting to see at the moment. FMS can go on. Intake prop and probes we'll leave off for now. External lights, we just have the nav lights on. FMS we can set as required. I've already set up a very basic flight plan for us here. I've had pretty mixed results with the FMS so far. It definitely needs some work still. So POSNET, we've got Molly. We've just taken the GPS position there to align the IRS. For the route, very simple here. We've just got Molly returning to Molly, flight number 21. Perfinit's where I find things fall down slightly at the moment. I assume the weights here are in thousands of pounds, but I've had some quite strange results entering weights manually, so we're just going to leave it as is for now. Thrust limit, we've got full takeoff power, full climb power. And takeoff, again, a bit strange. The V-speeds are pretty high, I would say, for the PC-21. We've got V1134, VR141, V2166. According to the manual, VR is 90 knots, so there's quite a big disparity there. And again, I would say that the FMS currently needs some work. It's nice though to be able to manually enter a flight plan, of course, and to then display that on the navigation display. Anyway, the FMS is set as required. PTT is set to the central position. AMU is set to normal. ECS temp will leave in its present position. VCS is guarded. Fan speed is selected to auto, and cabin pressure selected to normal. So we are good for the start, running through the engine start checks. Canopy pin has been removed, so we'll close up the canopy. You can see there the pin's stowed. No sounds associated there with the canopy animation, which I do find to be a bit of a shame. And the same there when locking up the canopy, but the canopy is now closed and locked. The red anti-collision light is selected on. Oil temperature. Interestingly, the checklist calls for an oil temperature above 40 degrees. Obviously the oil temperature at this stage is going to rather depend on ambient temperature. 15 degrees makes sense outside. So I presume there's a slight error there in the checklist, otherwise perhaps the PC-21 has some sort of oil warming system, but I suspect not. Anyway, currently showing 15 degrees. Power control lever is selected off. PMS is selected on. Auto start, we can engage. Nice spool up sounds there initially, but we're just going to let the engine run all the way up to max motoring here, and you'll notice there's a little bit of a disagreement between the sounds and the overall animation. We're looking for rise in oil pressure. We now have 1 psi there. You can hear it sounds like the engine's now spooling down, but we're still showing an increase on NG. You can hear the sounds there are on a bit of a loop, and currently not in line with the animation, which is a touch of a shame. Anyway, oil pressure looks good. We are at max motoring, so power control lever can go on. And again, overall the spool up sounds are nice. It just needs sorting out slightly there on the loop. So we have rise in NG, rise in ITT, prop RPM coming up, oil pressure still coming up as well. I have noticed the ITT seems to be incredibly low as well. We peak out at around 130 degrees Celsius. Anyway, we'll just wait for the engine to stabilise. We're looking for at least 54% on the NG, which we now have. Looks like we have a good start, so the engine oil pressure and temperatures are both in the green. Prop, we're looking for at least 600 RPM. We have 1,000, nearly 1,100. Generators 1 and 2 are both on. External power we can now disconnect. And we'll just come back to the systems page. MC HUD switch, we'll set to MC HUD. Intake, we'll leave off. Oxygen can go on. And confirming we do have oxygen flow there, both in the front cockpit and the rear cockpit. Flaps can go through to landing. So you'll notice currently the system aligning, that should take about 1 minute, and then we'll get both the left MFD as well as the PFD. Anyway, just visually confirming the operation of the flaps. They look good there in the landing position and display correctly as well there on the EMD. We'll come back through to the takeoff position. And once again displaying correctly. And visually checked. Air brake. Showing air brake extension, we can stay that once again. UFCP set as required. We're just going to wait for the final stages of the alignment here, otherwise I find that the UFCP switches don't actually hold their correct position. So we now have alignment. We'll come to fuel. Stroke fuel for the flight today, £450. Bingo fuel, £350. We've currently got over £1,200 on board the aircraft, so plenty of fuel for the flight. And transponder there will just come into 2000 on the squawk. And we'll leave the transponder as is for the time being. Nothing else we really need to do there on the UFCP today. Left MFD is set as required. PFD is set as required. And the right MFD is set as required. DWP now just showing fuel pumps. Again, we're expecting to see that. And for the taxi, landing light can go on. Park brake is off. And we can now make our way out towards the southerly runway. Okay, so we're now down at the holding point for runway 19. We'll be departing out to the south, so more or less straight ahead. Running through our before takeoff checks then, we can arm up the ejection seat, just removing the pin there to do so. So the pin is stowed, once again oxygen is selected on, and we do have good oxygen flow. Air brake is selected in, flaps are set to take off. Trim aids are on, trims are in the green. Canopy is closed and locked. Flight instruments are checked. Probe heats are selected on. DWP, we just have probe heat and fuel pump. Flight controls, once again just confirming full and free. Transponder, we'll select to mode Charlie. And the recognition lights and white anti-collision light can go on. So park brake off. We'll clear on final. I do like the sounds there as well as you come up on the power. I think they're pretty good. Not much wind around, just manoeuvring ourselves into position here on runway 19. And as I say, we'll be departing out to the south. So coming up on the power control lever. Getting nice sounds I think overall. We're looking to rotate at 90 knots, climbing away at a pitch of 10 degrees. There's 90, coming back on the stick. The aircraft is pretty sensitive on the rudder, fairly typical of the sim of course. Nicely climbing away now, we do have positive climb, the gear can come up. We're up through 120 knots, coming up through 300 feet, so the flaps can come up as well. Okay, so we just got the aircraft leveled off, trimming for level flight, tracking out towards the southwest now, towards the town of Lintau. That's our first turning point. Back at around 94% on the torque, still getting a pretty good head of speed here. We're doing about 300 knots. Nice performance in the PC-21 as you might expect. We're starting our run in just a moment's time, so we'll go smoke on. To do that we just toggle the logo lights. We've got a hardware keybind, you can see we are now trailing smoke. So we'll just continue out towards the southwest for now. We'll momentarily be peeling off to the right up and towards the hills. The first valley will be flying down just off our 1 o'clock. Speed still building here now, 340 knots. Looks like V&E's around 370, so we'll try not to break that throughout the run, but we'll try and keep the speed up nice and high. Firstly, to get around the run as quickly as possible. Secondly, as well, of course, to have some fun. So peeling off to the right. Initially, we're just going to be following the road that we've got down below us, out towards the west. Really nice performance again from the aircraft. Excellent rates of climb, nice high speed. It really does feel like flying a light jet for all intents and purposes, as you would expect. Very much what it's designed to achieve, more or less. So the road just down below us on the left, we'll be following that, as I say, up and towards the hills. Breaking over the other side of the mountains here, just off the nose. Whilst we've got a nice straight section here ahead of us, we'll go for an aileron roll. So full deflection there, nice snappy response on the controls as you'd expect. We'll obviously discuss the handling characteristics as we go, but really enjoying the way the PC-21 feels to fly. Not even saying necessarily that it's accurate to the aircraft, I'm not entirely sure on that, but it nevertheless is a real joy to fly, very snappy on the controls, very precise. One of the smoothest aircraft as well, I would say, I've flown in the sim. So just continuing to follow the road here as it works its way up the hills. You can see we've got a few vehicles down there below us. Obviously bleeding off some speed there as we climb. So back down to around 250 knots, we'll build all of that back up here in the descent. We'll just over bank here to get us back down towards ground level, back down into the valley. So 320 knots, again we'll try and stay below 360. Just come up over turning point 3. They're making a westerly turn now out towards the town of Altdorf. Again, really enjoyable aircraft, great fun. Just continue to follow the road for now. We'll go for a slightly slower aileron roll there, and again, just very smooth on the controls. 340 knots, looking good on the speed, just continuing to follow this valley out towards Altdorf. Whilst we've got a bit of room to manoeuvre here, we'll go for a loop. We'll just get ourselves all the way up to 360 knots. And coming back on the stick. The aircraft does feel pretty linear on the controls. What you put in is what you get out. Excellent visibility as well, as you can see. Very much to be expected. There's our smoke trail just behind us. Try and line ourselves up once again as we come through the loop. And just keeping an eye on that speed, coming up to around 320 knots there. Breaking away back out towards the west. Yeah, really great fun. Very much what I was expecting from the PC-12. So far the aircraft isn't disappointing in terms of how it flies. Maybe, as with most add-ons in the sim, just lacking a little bit of feedback in terms of overall sound ambience. There's not much change in noise when manoeuvring, no shaking, no rattling, no change in air noise. That would be nice. I think it would make the aircraft feel just a little bit more alive. We're nudging up on 360 knots here, so we'll just come back towards 90% on the torque just to bleed off a little bit of speed here. Just coming overhead Altdorf. We'll track north up the river just very momentarily here. We'll be peeling back off towards the east into the mountains. So getting ready to turn down the next valley. We'll leave the turn nice and late here just so we can pull some G. Firstly, that's going to help us bleed off some speed, but of course as well we'll get a feel for how the aircraft handles a little bit of G. Back up on the torque again. So we're going to be making a right turn just off the right wing. All the way back on the stick. producing some sort of caution or warning there, not entirely sure what that was. Didn't see a master warning light. Didn't see what we actually managed to achieve in terms of G there. But overall the aircraft felt good. It wasn't completely compliant there, it did take a little bit of effort. You could see it was a little bit unhappy with the high G load. That's got us back down to around 300 knots. And we're nicely back down towards ground level here, so we'll keep the aircraft nice and low for this next section of the run. Out towards turn point 6. As I say, I think for me the best way I can describe the aircraft is smooth in terms of how it flies, just really enjoyable, great fun to chuck around. And just a really nice feeling between what I have on my hardware and what the aircraft's actually doing. So just bring ourselves back round towards the west, lining ourselves up with a hill just off the nose. Absolutely stunning scenery once again though, you can see why I recommended the run. It's a really spectacular part of the world, great fun as well. Really enjoying the run in the PC-21, it's even better in something a little bit faster like the Hawk for example. Did also take the F1A4 around, that was good. Anyway, tracking out towards the hills just off the nose, we're going to take the right side of the hill just off the nose here, down the valley. We'll go inverted once we come across the top of the hill here. It's a pretty sharp drop back down towards ground level. We'll keep the torque for now. We'll come all the way back to idle as we come into the descent, otherwise we're going to overspeed the aircraft. Looks like we've got a little bit of weather off the nose, but we should maintain visual. Again, bleeding off some knots here as we climb. So all the way back to idle now on the power, rolling inverted. Diving back down the side of the hill. I'm having really good fun in the aircraft. It is, again, a very enjoyable experience. The HUD as well, very nice, very easy to read. Turn down the brightness quite a bit there. It is a bit oversaturated ordinarily, but the brightness adjustments are very good. And you can see it's been very easy to read throughout the run. So back up on the torque once again, we'll build up some speed. Nearing the end of the run now, it does take a little bit longer in something like the PC-21, would certainly be done by now in the Hawk. But we'll just be going back out towards the northeast over the lake. And the lake will pretty much take us back towards Molly. Get ourselves back down towards ground level, skim the top of the lake. Once we get back overhead Molly, we'll just pull a couple more high G manoeuvres there just to get slightly more of a feel for the flight model. We'll try a stall as well, of course, see how the aircraft behaves there. And from what I've read of the manual, the spin behaviour sounds like it should be pretty reasonable as well, so we'll give that a go. 340 knots, just sweeping over the tops of the trees. Yeah, definitely really good fun coming around the Swiss Alps here in the PC-21. Would I fly it in preference to the Hawk? Potentially. It's not an aircraft I thought I would enjoy as much as I have. I think the Hawk still nudges it for me, just because I'm a big fan of the aircraft, but certainly PC-21 is probably a little bit more versatile than what you can do with it overall. So there's Molly just coming up off the right wing. We'll track back just parallel to runway 01, we'll go and perform our manoeuvres out towards the north. And then we'll come back in for a landing on runway 19. We'll come back up to 95% on the torque, get some altitude in hand here for a few more manoeuvres as I say. So we might as well carry out the stall here first, that's going to allow us to bleed off the airspeed, gain some altitude. Then we should have that in hand for the spin later on. We'll keep full power on for now, just coming through 180 knots. Having to come back on the stick, about halfway through full deflection currently. Not using any trim. Back through 140, we'll take the power off now. Almost up to 10,000 feet already, again, really exemplifying the performance of the PC-21. So fully back on the stick, there's the stall warning, stalled around 80 knots. Apparently stalling in the aircraft is pretty benign, so far it does seem to be pretty benign, just dropping the nose. Quite a high rate of descent. But overall, as the manual states, very benign stall characteristics. So that's nice to see if that's what the aircraft's supposed to do, it seems to do that. Just get ourselves clear of the weather and then we'll go for our spin. Interesting to note there, the aircraft didn't want to enter a spin at all. I kept fully back on the controls. So it does seem that the stall behaviour there is modelled pretty well. To induce the spin we should have to use rudder apparently, so we'll be doing that in just a moment. Up to around 9,000 feet, so we've still got about 8,000 feet in hand. Just bleeding off that speed once again, and again trying to keep clear of the weather. So we'll just get the speed back, again fully back on the stick, and then we'll feed in the rudder. We'll go for a spin out to the right. Almost up through 10,000 feet now, so plenty of altitude in hand. There's 100 knots, we'll feed in the rudder. We've got full right rudder. The aircraft pretty reticent so far to go into a spin. I was expecting a little bit more there given what I read in the manual. We'll just try some slightly more aggressive manoeuvring here, trying to induce that spin. I've got full left rudder this time. Just get some trim in here as well, really try and upset the aircraft. Yeah, it's a little bit of trim seems to have helped. So full left rudder, pretty aggressive actually on the spin. We'll also recover from that, so we've got full right rudder. All the way back on the power here. Interestingly looking now like we're probably not going to recover from the spin.
Altitude 8,000, 7,000, 6, we're at 6, man. I'm head forward, Goose. I can't reach the ejection handle.
So indeed there, the spin actually was unrecoverable. We just reset ourselves up to altitude here. Quite interesting, since the manual would seem to suggest that it should be relatively easy to recover from a spin in the aircraft. We came all the way back on the power, we used opposite rudder, centred up the stick, which is as per the manual checklist. Nevertheless, couldn't recover there, straight into the ground. So I think maybe just a little bit of work still needed on the aircraft's handling characteristics. Anyway, we'll make our way back in towards Molly. Smoke system can go off again for now. Speed's back through 180 knots, so we'll take the gear down. And we'll aim to fly 180 knots initially here onto final approach. Runway just off to our 1 o'clock. We'll take the air brake here as well to keep the speed in check. So for the rejoin checks, fuel, we've got 900 pounds on board the aircraft, plenty of fuel for the approach and any go around if necessary. Flight instruments are checked, radios and avionics are set, altimeter is set. Coming back in for an approach onto 19, you can see the runway now just off our 1 o'clock. Speed is checked, we'll go to takeoff config on the flaps. We'll let the speed come back towards 140 knots, getting rid of the air brake. Full landing checks, airspeed is good, air brake is in, landing gear, we have down 3 greens. Flaps are set to take off, and the brakes are checked. Just coming around onto final, so we'll go to landing on the flaps. And we'll just let the speed bleed back now until we're on our AOA target. Should be around 110 knots. They're looking good on speed. coming back up on the power control lever, maintaining 110. Looks like we have a very slight crosswind out from the right. The aircraft getting a little bit bashed around here, but it is slightly turbulent. Overall it's handling quite nicely at low speed. Back off the power control lever, holding the aircraft off. There's touchdown. No beta range in the PC-21, so just coming onto the brakes. Getting the aircraft nice and slow, and we'll have to backtrack here just to make the exit off on our left. Okay, so we're now clear of the runway. We'll run through our after landing checks so the flaps can come up. And we have flaps indicated up. Pro-peats can go off. Recognition lights. And the white anti-collision light can go off. So we'll peel off to the right. As you'd expect, the PC-21 is very easy to control on the ground. Again, the rudder does feel a little bit sensitive. Speed certainly gets away from you fairly quickly, but again, there's no beta range on the aircraft, so that's probably fairly accurate. You have to ride the brakes a little bit, which the manual does suggest is the way to handle the aircraft on the ground. So we'll swing ourselves around. Pretty decent turn radius just using the rudder, but having to use a little bit of brake here as well just to tighten up the turn. But again, the manual suggests that that would be accurate to the real-world aircraft. Onto the brakes, park brake can go on. And for the shutdown checks, power control lever is set to idle, park brake is set. Landing light is off, oxygen is off. Let's cancel the master warning there. And the power control lever can go to the fuel off position. Again, pretty reasonable shutdown sounds there, not bad overall. So we do have the NG running down. Quite a few warnings and cautions there popping up on the DWP. The MC HUD switch can go off. External lights will take the red anti-collision light off. Canopy we can unlock. And again, would be nice to see some sounds there with the canopy. So the canopy is unlocked and opened. We'll insert the pin. Do the same there as well for the ejection seat. Probably should have done that after landing, but it's not included in the checklist. So generators 1 and 2 both off. And lastly battery 1 and 2 off. And that's our shutdown checklist complete. So there you go guys, I do hope you enjoyed our outing in the IRIS Simulations Pilatus PC-21. The aircraft is, I think, once again another very nice effort from IRIS, and indeed they seem to be going from strength to strength with each release in the sim, which I think of course is what we all want to see. I certainly very much enjoyed the outing in the aircraft, definitely feel as though I got my money's worth. As usual though, I'll try and break things down into some positives and negatives for you, just to give you my overall conclusions on the product. So starting with the texturing and modelling, I think we've discussed that at some length already. By and large, I think the PC-21 looks really nice, but there are certainly areas that could use improvement. I don't expect though that we're going to see said improvements, given that the aircraft is planned for release also on the console. I'm sure our friends on the Xbox will be very happy to hear that the PC-21 is planned for release. Again though, I do think it would have perhaps been nice to have an option to download, for example, a high resolution texture set. for those who want to use the aircraft on the PC. Nevertheless, the aircraft does by and large look very good, and certainly in all of the areas that are going to be focusing your attention, I think the PC-21 looks pretty great. Modelling detail is generally good throughout. There are quite a few nice custom pieces of ground equipment, and for me, once again, I think one of the best modelled features on the aircraft are its MFDs. Systems depth on the aircraft overall pretty reasonable. I would say as far as the PC-21 systems go, above average there in terms of systems depth. In terms of avionics, obviously we've got quite a bit missing behind the scenes of those MFDs. Still some nice features there though, without a doubt, and once again really hoping that IRIS expand on the map feature that we looked at earlier on, making hopefully a user-friendly option for adding one's own charts into the MFD. Generally what was modelled of the system seemed to be pretty robust. Again, I would question the ITT there during the startup, that looks to be far too low to me, so I think there probably, as ever, are one or two areas that could be tweaked. But the PC-21 definitely falls into that category of product where you get a pretty good feel for the aircraft, you can run through a checklist, actuate pretty much all of the systems. Nice little details as well, for example, arming the ejection seat, removing the canopy pin. Speaking of the canopy, bringing us onto the aircraft sounds, overall I found those to be a mixed bag. I do broadly like how the PC-21 sounds, but I certainly think some tweaks could be made there to improve the sound set overall. Firstly, externally, I think the aircraft sounds pretty good for the most part. It sounds better at some angles than others. It is of course nice to have those 3D sounds, but again I think just a little bit of tweaking would go a long way towards improving the sound set externally overall. And the same goes internally. Generally I think the aircraft sounds quite nice, but we saw for example the looping there during the spool up. There are a couple of cockpit sounds missing there as well that I would have liked, for example when closing up the canopy. And again, as discussed, I would have found it preferable to have some more sounds during manoeuvring, just to give the aircraft a little bit more feedback, a little bit more immersion. Nevertheless though, I found the sounds held up pretty well overall, and certainly in key areas they were more than good enough. In terms of the flight modelling, certainly the PC-21 was a joy to fly. Difficult as always with these sorts of reviews to say how accurate or not the flight model may be. On takeoff, the rudder did feel a little bit overly sensitive to me. Obviously we know that tends to be an issue in the sim. The climb out and the cruise felt good. The aircraft was certainly a real joy to throw around as we discussed during the flight. Incredibly smooth on the controls, very responsive, felt very sharp. And again, quite a linear response on the controls, certainly what I was putting in seemed to be what I was getting out. Great performance from the PC-21, cruises quickly, nice high climb rate as well. As I mentioned during the introduction, I'm generally not a big fan of military turboprops, particularly since I've had a few bad experiences with them in sims in the past. But I found the IRIS Simulations PC-21 to be absolutely great fun. I think that came across during the flight. The aircraft stall behaviour seemed to be pretty good, that matched up quite nicely with what I was expecting from the manual. The spin obviously didn't work out quite so well there. I think the fact that the aircraft was somewhat tentative to enter the spin initially was at least partly my own fault. We probably wanted a little bit more trim there to initiate the spin, and similarly we were probably a touch low on the speed at the point I put in the rudder. Nevertheless, I was expecting the aircraft to spin slightly more easily, and certainly in terms of the recovery there, quite surprising just how difficult it was to recover. As we talked through there during the manoeuvre, I was using the recovery technique outlined in the manual. I feel like with a little more altitude in hand I might have eventually gotten things under control, but nevertheless you could see they're really struggling to get the aircraft into any semblance of normal flight after entering the spin. I haven't actually had the chance to play around with the aircraft's weight and balance, try similar manoeuvres. It'd be interesting to see whether I get the same result again in the future. Otherwise though, the aircraft felt good on the approach in the approach configuration, back at 110 knots. And by and large, the product did give me the feel I was expecting of the PC-21. You really do very much feel like you're in a jet trainer or a light attack aircraft. Brilliant fun on these sorts of flights, and once again, as I say, I think the PC-21 is a little bit more versatile than something like the Hawk. I thought the effects on the aircraft were generally nice as well. We had the default exhaust heat blur, that looked pretty good. Nice smoke effects and nice vortices coming off the wing there during high G manoeuvring. In terms of the aircraft's FPS, pretty good there. I was getting 79 FPS in the PC-21 versus around 91 in the default Cessna 152. So pretty good there, only dropping around 12 frames, quite surprising given the level of glass real estate in the cockpit. In short, as I say, I think IRIS Simulations have done a very nice job with the PC-21. Certainly around the £20 price point, I think you're getting a good quality value for money product. There are a couple of areas that could use cleaning up, for example the pilot animations. The mirrors as well aren't modelled particularly nicely, but that's generally a sim limitation. And once again, it would be nice to have some higher resolution textures in certain areas. Certainly I would like to see a bit of an improvement to the aircraft sound set overall. As with most military aircraft in the sim, you may have somewhat of a limited use case for the PC-21. With it being a training aircraft though, and obviously used by multiple aerobatics teams around the world, you are going to be able to simulate more realistic operations within Microsoft Flight Simulator for this type of an aircraft than you might, for example, with the F-14 or the F-22. Being a turboprop as well, I do think that the product offers up a nice change of pace compared with something like the Hawk or the MB339, although for me the Hawk does still take some beating for this type of flying. Anyway, as I say, overall another very nice effort from IRIS Simulations, good value for money, and certainly the PC-21 offers up a lot of fun. Once again, ladies and gents, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. If you really enjoyed what you saw, as a little favour to me, if you haven't already seen my Halloween cinematic, the YouTube algorithm is being a little bit funny with that one, and certainly I'm quite proud of the video, so please consider giving that a watch. I'll link that at the end of this video. As always, a very big thank you to my channel members and patrons for all of your support. It is thoroughly appreciated. And to all of you, I do hope you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.